I'm Andy Smith. I'm a longtime member of the consulting team here at Algorithm based out of Central Ohio. And today I'll be talking about some enhancements in 24R2 to the estimating capabilities in Acumatica. A common question I get when talking with our customers about presenting pricing to their customers is, what's an effective way to present different price breaks based on quantities that I might be quoting to them? And to date, in prior versions of Acumatica, we had some workarounds for that. You could use notes or add kind of a fake line on a quote, things like that, but it was a little bit messy. And so what we'll see here in 24R2 is the ability through the estimating module. So it's important to note that it's limited to that module, which is technically part of the manufacturing solution in Acumatica. The ability to do just that in terms of presenting those price breaks. So we'll look at that. And then along the way, we'll also note some other minor enhancements around overriding profit margin and rounding. And then in the end, we'll look at how you can then, you can see the result of that on a sales quote, or for that matter, it doesn't have to be the sales quote. It could be a QT type sales order, or you can do it right out of the estimating module. But basically, how you can present that information back to the customer. So let's take a look at how that operates. I'm here on the sales quote screen. And so you can see I have this sales quote set up over in the CRM module. And today I'm going to be quoting some custom pipe covers to my customers, ABC Ventures. For those of you familiar with the sales quote screen, there's this details tab, which would typically have whichever items I'm quoting. And again, we could use that in the past to put some quantity breaks, things like that. But for today's demonstration, we're going to be looking at this estimates tab. And again, this is based on the estimates module. And you can see I already have an estimate set up here. It's giving me the basic information on my sales quote screen, but we'll switch over in a second and look at the details of that. But before we do, I want you to notice our total here is $73.53, and that's going to come up here in a second when we look at this estimate. I'll switch over to our estimate. Again, this is maybe a new screen for some of you, so I'll walk you through a few of the details here without a full tour, but this is essentially where I can come in and create what I call a fake bill of material, where if I'm developing something new for a customer, I can either copy from an existing bill of material or build something from scratch. You can see down here at the bottom, I have my operations tab where I've added some steps in my pipe cover production, and I can put my estimates of what I think it's going to take to build that thing. Again, just in general with the estimate module, let's say my customer accepts that. It makes it really easy at that point to actually create the bill of material. I can create inventory items from here, and I can create production orders. But again, that's all existing feature set in that estimating module. So let's look at some of the new things that are in here. To start out, I'll switch to this totals tab. And this gives me overall information about my estimate, how many I'm quoting to the customer, what my markup percentages are. These are preset at the system level for what I'm doing here. But again, here's my total price that I mentioned back on the sales quote. The first change that I'm going to talk about in 24R2 is this rounding capability. And this is pretty simple. It's just if I want to not present dollars and cents back to my customer, I just want to keep it rounded to dollars. I check that box. And you notice now my pricing changed to $74. So it rounds it up or down, excuse me, to the nearest dollar based on what currency I'm using. Pretty simple. The second simple change is this override capability back down here on this markup percent that I was mentioning earlier. You can see here, and again, this is from prior versions, I can change all of these individual markup percents in my labor or my material. But if I want to mark up or change my markup percent at the estimate level, I can just check that, it turns those off and toggles that one on. Again, pretty simple. For this demonstration, I'm going to turn that back off, because the big change here is on this price breaks tab. So this is new in 24R2. As I come over to that tab and I'll scroll down and I start adding rows here, you can see the first row, it copied from my totals tab as far as my initial quantity, and it really copied all the rest of those values in terms of markup and pricing and cost and things like that. And I could change those if I wanted to, but for this example, I'm going to leave those alone. I'll add a second row. And in this case, I also want to quote 10 pallets to my customer. And so it obviously adds that second row. But let's say that I want to, I know that to produce 10, it's going to take me a little bit longer. So I up my lead time. I could then override pricing, things like that. But here, $73 for one, $52 for 10. That looks pretty good to me as I'm working through this estimate. So I'll have that third row. And in this example, I'm going to really go for it. I'm going to quote them 100 pallets. And again, I know that's going to take a long time to produce. So I turn on my override there. I bump that up. But in this case, I'm looking at this and it's $52 for 10 and only $50, which is not a lot of difference here for 100. And I don't think they're going to go for that. So I really want to adjust that. Let's say $40 sounds good off the top of my head. So I look at that, but then if I come over here to my markup percent, I can see that's gone negative now, and that's not good news. So that, I don't want to lose money on the deal. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to tweak it just a little bit. And now I can see I'm making a little bit of money. I think that looks pretty good as far as what I want to present back to the customer. Again, there's other things I can do here in terms of which of these rows I want to print on the quote, which one is the primary row that I want to present. But for this example, we'll just leave it right there. I'll save my estimate. And now if I come back to my sales quote and refresh it because I changed the underlying estimate, I need to do one more thing here because in my install of Acumatica, I have it set up to require approvals for quotes. So I'll just go ahead and self-approve that, which allows me then to print my quote so I can send it to the customer. And what we'll see here is, as I scroll down and look at my line items, here is my main line for one for 73.53, but underneath it, it has inserted those additional lines and done a really nice job of italicizing. I mean, we can tweak these in Report Designer, but essentially saying, hey, these are just sort of other options, Mr. Customer, that you can opt for. If I scroll down here at the bottom, you can see that it hasn't changed the overall total. So they can talk about what those options are, but the quote is still pretty much intact. So again, for me, that's a nice round way of getting from the sales quote over to the estimating module, back to the quote to present to the customer and allowing us to easily show those options.